Yeah, so the technical term for what I suffered was lack of talent. So at school,
not many are afflicted with that.
At school, I did my it's called a flying scholarship, so 16 hours, the equivalent of a private pilot's license. And then at university, back then they've changed the system partly because of what I went through. You could do the first part of your flying training, so something like 100 hours. I finished that relatively early at university because I was keen and I would just get through it in the summertime. It was a great summer job when I wasn't at university. And then I had 2 years where my university air squadron was really about doing the odd flight here and there, but generally being a kind of practicing to be a junior officer, looking out for the other officer cadets from the university air squadron. Then I did, at the end of university, I took a gap year. So I went skiing. I was a ski guide in the French Alps. Probably the best job I've ever had.
I was going to say, it sounds horrible.
Yeah, that was a tough one. And then officer training, 9 months. And then I was right place, right time for a great opportunity. At the end of officer training, there's always a backlog in pilot training in the UK. It's been in the media quite a lot recently, actually. It's not getting any better. But again, a double-edged sword. You've got to wait for your flying training, but there's some cool opportunities. So they sent me off to Tokyo for a year, Tokyo, Japan, to be basically a very junior liaison officer over there working for United Nations Command. Lots of Americans in that part of the world, so we would fly in and out of Korea, Guam, other bases in that region, all around Japan. So I did that for a year. Great experience. Wouldn't have changed anything about that. Point is, by the time I got back to the second phase of my flying training, a good 3 or 4 years had gone. And in that time, my skill fade was, extreme. So I remember vividly actually being sat in the cockpit of a Firefly, is the name of the aircraft, with my instructor. And my instructor turns to me and he says, "Okay, Graham, take me up. We'll bash the circuit. Then we'll go and do some stalling. We'll do some radio navigation. And if we've got time at the end, we'll do some aerobatics." And everyone else in my course, they finished the first phase of their flying training the Friday before. This is the Monday. So they had the weekend for skill fade. I did mine, 3 or 4 years ago. And I'm sat there thinking, well, in fact, not thinking, I just said to the guy, "Look, no, you're going to have to take me back to straight and level because it's been 3 or 4 years. I'm not able to do that, I'm afraid."
Welcome to the Transition Drill Podcast. I'm your host, Paul Pantiani. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. So let's get into this.
So this is something, transitioning is something quite dear to my heart. And I guess, reflecting on it, going from pilot to intelligence officer was, and I'd like to think folk would kind of get something out of this, dealing with failure at a relatively young age at the start of your career, and that can either make it or break it for you, and embracing failure and what I've learned from it. I'm sure that you've got listeners that will be going through similar things, maybe not making the SWAT team or maybe not making X, Y, and Z. And, we don't lose, we learn.
No, that's the gist of what this podcast is about, it's about each of my guests' individual experience with their transition. Yeah. And ultimately, how their transition stories are going to resonate with the right listener who's going to be able to relate.
Love it.
Going backwards, though. So last year was your first time going to Coachella?
Yeah. First music festival in about 2 or 3 years with COVID. Certainly the first time at Coachella. Second North American music festival. But first time at Coachella, and first time eyes wide open and saw some things that you think you've seen it all at music festivals, going to Glastonbury in the UK, but Coachella was something completely different. A younger crowd, a lot more Instagram, interesting things. The people watching was off the charts. Loved it.
You plan on going again this year? Because it's basically right around the corner.
Yeah, no, you know what? The reason we went last year, we got free accommodation from my friend, a fellow entrepreneur who's just bought a house there, and they'd just bought it and they'd never seen it before. And we said, well, look, we can go in and just give it a once over for you, take a look. So we got free accommodation, and having seen even the price of a Motel 6 to go back, we figured, nah, we won't bother this year. So it was a one-hit wonder, but great time. So Harry Styles and Shania Twain on stage. Oh, fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, the one thing, and I'm sure it's probably that way with any major concert that goes on anywhere in the world. The accommodations in that immediate area for that time period when the concerts are going on just go through the roof.
Yeah, big style. And at 39, I ain't getting in a tent in the desert again. I've kind of been there, professionally. I'm not going to do that privately. There's I've got a lower tolerance for that kind of thing these days. So yeah, I won't be going back in a tent, I'm afraid.
For those listening, they obviously could hear your accent. Where are you from?
So I'm from Scotland in the UK, specifically in Scotland, Edinburgh, which is the capital city. A lovely, lovely place, a real fairy tale city to kind of grow up and live in. J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, she's from there. So I don't know if you've been over that way before.
No.
What sets Edinburgh apart is the history. We've got a 1,000-year-old castle on an extinct volcano. We've got a royal palace that is over 1,000 years old as well. The Royal Yacht Britannia, the late Queen's super yacht, if you like, that's docked there. And there's lots of private schools and universities in Edinburgh, and they're all incredible Gothic era buildings, and that's what J.K. Rowling took as her inspiration for Hogwarts. So it really is. We don't have Disney World in the UK, but we've got places like Edinburgh where people can come and just revel in the history. It's a great place to live.
Big family, small family?
Relatively small. One big sister, 2 years older than me, Amy, and two parents, as I refer to them, happily divorced. So my dad's remarried, but both parents still got on really well. So yeah, really loving family. Couldn't have really hoped for a better family setup in life. So yeah. Love them to bits, and that's one of the tricky things about moving away from home, despite doing lots of interesting stuff in the military before and being away from home. Being away at this stage in life with parents getting older, it's always in the back of your mind. Was this a selfish move? But of course, with their support, it makes it all that easier to come over here. And the world's a small place. You're only 10 hours away from getting back to them, plus a bit of jet lag, so not too bad.
Mom and dad both work?
No, they're both retired.
I mean, growing up.
Yeah. So dad worked for, I guess, the equivalent of your IRS, a tax man, as I used to call it. But he got involved in some interesting stuff, some investigations into the kind of dark and mysterious world of tax evasion. And I remember he showed me a photo with our equivalent of the Navy SEALs, the former SAS folk, helping him out with some surveillance stuff. So on one side, in kind of IRS, he sat in an office, and then towards the end of his career, he was getting involved in some quite sexy stuff, I think, for IRS or our equivalent of IRS. And my mum was a music teacher. She was a piano teacher. And one of my biggest regrets in life is not tapping into that resource from an early age, because wouldn't it be great just to jump on a piano and be able to tinkle away? I can just about do chopsticks, so really regret that. So Mum, if you're listening, I'm so sorry I didn't pay more attention to music, but there's still time. Did you have an interest in music as a young boy? It's funny. I think in my DNA, I can hold a beat. And I know a thing or two about music, and I guess as part of a midlife crisis, my best friends and I back home, there's three of us. This is slightly embarrassing, but it is what it is. I went through a period of my life when I realised, I've never owned a skateboard, I've never learnt surfing, and I've never been a DJ. But why not? So in the space of about 2 months, I bought myself a skateboard, rubbish at that, although not fallen off yet, not broken anything anyway. Learnt to surf, rubbish at that, but I'm in the right part of the world to get better. And I bought some DJ decks, and the three of us, we call ourselves the Scottish House Mafia. And we went from just playing around with it in our garage, to being paid for it. We would do like weddings, and then we did other friends' social events, and it was great fun. So there is a bit of music DNA somewhere in me, and DJing was actually a way of letting that out. But my girlfriend, my fiance, would argue that I'm also a rubbish DJ. She heard me do it once, and she wasn't very pleased. Well, she was pleased because it gave her something to laugh about. But there is a bit of music in me, but it's never been part of my career. No.
Hey, it could be funny though. You could end up getting a job because somebody might mistake you for Swedish House Mafia.
Well, that's exactly what we're going for. Scottish House Mafia. It's a bit tongue in cheek. We're not suggesting that we're as good as them, but we might get picked up somewhere down the line. We'll see.
So, growing up, was academics a drive for you?
Not really. I was very lucky. My parents. My parents got my sister and I into a private high school. They gave up stuff so that we could have a slightly better start in life than they would have had, which is great, and truly thankful for that. And although the school I went to, you're talking smaller classes, so more time with the teacher, not necessarily pushing us into one must get an A in every single subject or the world's going to end, but certainly channeling myself and my sister towards a university path or a college path, which might not be such a specific path to other schools in the area. So academics, I'm not about getting straight A's. I'm about doing enough to get me in. I guess I'm an efficient academic, I suppose. Getting the B that I need to get into college or university, and kind of took it from there. So yeah, not huge academics, just doing enough, not doing the bare minimum, but doing enough to get to where I need to be with efficiency.
What about sports?
Yeah, so sport was a bigger part of my school life. Scotland, big rugby nation, so rugby was the school sport, and I guess I was kind of lucky or unlucky depending which way you look at it. The schools that play rugby against each other in Scotland, there's only about 20. It's quite a small community. Scotland, population of about 5 million, so a relatively small country within the UK. So these schools, some of them are massive. Some of the Edinburgh schools, 2,000 kids in a high school, compared to mine, I think we had maybe 300 kids. So the rugby team, the senior rugby team, if there are 15 guys that can stand up, run straight, catch a ball, sometimes chuck a ball, kick a ball, you're in the rugby team. I'm 5'8". I don't weigh much, so I was out in the wing. I guess I'd be the equivalent of a wide receiver. And I was the 15th guy in my year who could, play rugby. So I made the first 15 rugby team, which is quite a cool thing to, I played first. I was in the team. In other schools, I would have barely made maybe their 5th or 6th team. So on one hand, we would play rugby against these massive schools and get beaten to smithereens. It could be quite embarrassing at times. But on the other hand, I played first 15 rugby for my school, and then that transitioned into playing rugby at a relatively good level at university, and then also into the Air Force as well, where I played a bit of rugby. So what I love about sport, it opens so many doors. What you get from the teamwork from a really young age, and also, if you put effort and you listen to your coaches and you bring stuff together on the day when it comes off, it's an amazing feeling than just turning up and getting lucky. I ski to quite a high standard. That's really been my kind of main sport. I was a ski instructor at university, and that's also taken me all over the world. A bit more of a solo sport, but it's great to, again, skiing at quite a relatively high level with the Air Force. So I skied for the Air Force, and everything from, training your body physically, and then there's equipment in skiing as well, of course. So taking your ski from, something that's been sat on the shelf for 6 months into this finely tuned bit of equipment with a razor sharp edge and, the right wax applied for the right conditions at the right part of the ski and the right ski for the right discipline, and bringing all that together into a package and then getting down a downhill. It is a scary prospect when you're at the top of a downhill, you're looking down thinking, okay, there's no one in front of me, no one can get in the way, it is cleared for me, and my job now is to get from here down there as fast as I can in as straight as line as possible. It is really quite scary, but it's also about the most fun thing you can do on God's green earth. So yeah, skiing, another really good facet of training, applying that training, and relative success.
Was it slalom or downhill or just little speed downhill skiing?
So the 4 disciplines, we did them all. So slalom, giant slalom, weaving between, and then you've got super giant slalom, which is the kind of precursor to downhill, which really is, when you see it on TV, it doesn't do it justice. You can't quite see how steep these slopes are. And also the thing that people don't really see is they actually ice the slope. When you're skiing in holiday and you hit ice, I can already think of my mum when I was a kid, when she's in the ice, screaming behind me, understandably, because it's not a nice place to be on sheet ice, and maybe your skis aren't gripping. When you see the downhillers do it in the Olympics at that kind of level, they're actually injecting water into the snow to make it ice so they can hold up. So it is steep as anything, and it is icy as anything. A nightmare for a punter skier on holiday, but for an athlete, that's what you want, because you want just firm, hard, and you can get as much speed as possible. So all 4 disciplines, and yeah, great fun. Anyone that skis that has never raced, it's that next level if you want to really challenge yourself and really give yourself something to think about on those summer days. When you're thinking back to that downhill you did, it's a phenomenal experience. We'd highly recommend. And
you said you did that as an instructor while you were in college?
Yeah, so I was very lucky. As a kid, we'd go on ski holidays, and then in the summer, I'd go and practice or learn, how to become a better skier on the dry slope, just the local dry slope in Scotland. No snow at all, just on that plastic mat stuff. The kind of stuff that if you fall, you're just asking for a broken finger. Not much fun. But really good proving ground for then getting on snow. Really good transition. So skied all my life. And then at university, I was part of, I think you guys call it the OTC over here, kind of Officer Training Corps. So I was part of the Air Force OTC at university. And it was through that, there was a NATO school in Bavaria in Germany, where they would teach folks like me who could ski to be instructors, so that we could do adventurous training with our fellow airmen. So that's where I became an instructor. And then that kind of got me into the scene with the Air Force skiing, and then trained with the team, and then got selected for the team, which was an amazing 2 months off from what people might consider normal work in the Air Force, to go and actually be paid to ski and train. And I guess, to a stretch of the imagination, a professional skier for 2 months of my life. So, I'm sure people could argue against that, but I'm going to stick with that. Professional skier for 2 months, loved it.
So there was actually a connection to the military with them putting you through the instructor school.
Correct. Yeah. 2 weeks, downhill skiing, how to get someone to go from never seen a ski before to getting down a kind of a red slope. And then the second week was actually with carrying weight on your back, cross-country skis, head that direction for X miles, dig into the snow, have the worst night of your life in a snow cave, and then in the morning, mapping compass, get to this hut. So that was another great experience actually through skiing. Not one I've repeated ever since. I'm about saving up, paying money to be taken to the top of the hill and then skiing down. Not about dragging me and my belongings for miles up a hill to get that 1% of that time actually going downhill using gravity. But good fun, a challenge for sure, that kind of stuff.
Going back to something you said when you were playing rugby, as a young man, were you already kind of driven? Because you mentioned how you saw that when the coach put the plan together and the team executed the plan as they trained, you were successful. Did you find as a young man to where you saw that big picture in the sense of the importance of preparing for your life?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's probably in hindsight that you appreciate that sort of thing as a young person. But certainly it's the sort of thing they look for in the military, when they're selecting, as I was at the time, halfway through my university, a sponsorship to join the Air Force as an officer and as a pilot. And that's exactly what they were looking for, teamwork, does this person have that ethos, that background, that experience, that when we take them, they are not the finished article, but maybe a rough diamond that we can polish up, and then we can mold into that pilot, that intelligence officer, logistics officer, whatever that may be. Definitely stuff they look for. So a great proving ground for anyone that's interested in getting into the military or the police or that kind of that kind of career. Teamwork. No better place for honing those that skill set than on the field.
For yourself, did you have much military in your family growing up?
Nope. Next to nothing, pretty standard. My late grandfather, fought in the Second World War. That's it. My story of getting into the Air Force is somewhat embarrassing, but quite topical actually, because he's just released another film. So the film I'm talking about is the first Top Gun. When I was 1985, I think it came out, so I would have been, certainly under the age of 5, and I saw this film, Top Gun. And it's really weird and slightly embarrassing how a movie with Tom Hanks can really shape your life.
Tom Cruise.
Sorry, Tom Cruise. Wow, maybe not such a huge fan after all. But yeah, how a Tom Cruise film can play such a pivotal role in your life. So I saw the action scenes of, Maverick and Goose and Iceman, doing all their things. Look at me with the hands already. Can't put it down. And from, probably age of 5, that's what I was going to do, and nothing else. It was going to be that, and that alone. And to a certain extent, really proud that I achieved that goal. But then there was a bit of a pivot in my Air Force career, which no doubt we'll talk about later on.
So as a young boy coming out of high school, your plan was to go to college?
Yeah. So in the UK system, with the Air Force, the Army and the Navy and the Marine Corps, you're accelerated if you have a degree. So it was always my plan, okay, I'll go to university, and I knew they had the OTC thing there as well. So you can start the UK system, you can start your flying training while you're at university, you can get sponsored to be at university. Not a huge amount of money, but certainly as a student to get that additional income is great. But the most important thing is you can secure your position in the military. So whilst my peer group were all thinking, what are we going to do with our degrees? Am I going to get a job as a lawyer? Other career paths, I already knew. Well, I got in second year of a 4-year degree, so I knew I had something waiting for me, which again can be a double-edged sword actually, because you've got your place. So my academics, I took my foot off the gas and I started to concentrate on other things, like skiing, entrepreneurialism, and yeah, just about scraped through academically. So that, that's maybe an interesting thing. If I could change anything going back, I might have just focused a little bit more, because that degree, that bit of paper, when you leave the military, for me, it didn't really matter, but it could have been the difference between getting a really good job or getting a slightly average job. For me, it didn't really matter, like I say, but, don't take your foot off the gas academically. It's really important.
Well, you segue nicely, because you talk about being an entrepreneur while you were in college. You actually started a business that you were employing other students. What was that about? Yeah,
one of the best learning points of my life, Paul, for sure. So second year of university, surprise, surprise, college kids, they like to go out, have a drink, have a party. Over here, back in the UK, no different. Of course, well, the main difference is back in the UK, at 18, you can be in bars and clubs. So there were 4 of us, still close friends to this day. We saw somewhat of a loophole in the system where there was a nightclub that we knew in Edinburgh that was very quiet on the student night, which was a Wednesday. So we approached them with a plan saying, if we can fill this with our friends and our friends of friends, the network of network, if you like, we'll take the money on the door, and you guys, you've got lots of students buying drink at the bar. And they said, yeah, sure, let's give it a go. 3 years later, we built up to quite the enterprise, employing, I think about 50 plus other students as kind of our marketing people, generating wealth for themselves by getting their friends in. We had door staff, we had DJs, it sounds like quite a kind of sordid affair. Believe me, it was a well-run operation. But the feeling of being able to employ people and pay people, it was a great feeling. If I wasn't doing this, these 50 students, I'm not saying that we were giving them full-time salaries, right, but if we weren't doing this, if we hadn't taken this leap, taken this risk, these 50 people would all have to be finding jobs somewhere else. It was a great feeling to be able to pay out, for a job well done as well, and just generating wealth for each other, and a great learning experience. And I think anyone that is thinking about entrepreneurialism, have a go, do something, sell hoodies online, start a podcast, do something. If it goes nowhere, if it's failure, you are better for it. You've learned something that you will hopefully not do again. You won't repeat that mistake. You will take that learning and you'll apply it to something else, and you'll be that bit better at it next time. A bit like skiing or playing rugby. We trained, that didn't work out. what can we learn from that? Lessons identified, something that the military does so well, you know. And I think in business, people could do that a lot better. You know, we don't lose, we learn. And if you can keep that cycle going, that flywheel effect, you're better for it every time. In the military, in sport, in entrepreneurialism as well.
Was there never a point that for you, looking at the way you were growing this small business, that it could be something that you would have pivoted at that point in your life and followed it?
That's a good question. So I remember I'm a 21-year-old kid. I've got my dream job set up. I'm going to be in the Air Force. I'll do, at the time, I think it was 9 months of officer training. Then I'll finish off my flying training, and I was going to be a Red Arrow, you know, our equivalent of the Blue Angels or the Thunderbirds. I was going to be a single set fast jet pilot. Couldn't wait, loving it. Meanwhile, I've got this business that's generating decent money for a college kid. And folk around me were saying, Graham, you know, maybe just do this, you know, take that model, do it in another nightclub, do it in another city, you know, do concerts, do sporting events. You know, there's clearly money to be made in events, and we've proven we can do it. But no, at the time, nothing had changed since stage of 5. I want to be a maverick. You know, it was that or nothing. So we didn't go down that path, and I went down the military path. So an interesting kind of first fork in the road for me to make a decision. Was it that way or that way? But in the end, quite an easy decision to make, really. It was still dead set in the military.
And so you entered the military what year?
2006.
And from your parents' perspective, were they supportive of you wanting to be in the military, or was it something that they would have much rather you'd gone and met a lawyer or a doctor or something else?
Yeah, probably classic dynamic. You know, dad's keen for it. It's something the boy always wanted to do. He's, you know, they gave me a great education, a great head start in life. And he's achieved his goal. You know, he had this ambition, and he's worked hard at it. He's applied himself, and he's got himself one of the very few places that year, or positions that year, to be selected, to be sponsored at uni, to be a pilot in the Royal Air Force. I still scratch my head how I managed to do it, because it was fiercely competitive at the time. My mum, on the other hand, probably would rather I'd been an accountant or something at the time, with that classic dynamic, if you like. But again, just really proud that, you know, something I wanted to do, something I'd set my life goal was to get in the Air Force as a pilot, and I achieved that. And she was, you know, intensely proud. They both were.
Had you had any flying time, or as a young boy, or did you do anything on your own prior to even going towards college or the military related to flying? So
quite lucky in my education at high school. The Army, the Air Force and the Navy, they come around and they're effectively looking for talent. At the time, you don't think of it that way. You think of, oh, cool. I can go and spend 2 weeks in the summer at basically a flying camp. You get your equivalent of your private pilot's license, and they pay you to do it. I'm thinking this is too good to be true. So a humble brag, I could fly an aircraft solo before I could legally drive a car solo. So that was quite cool. So they had me at high school, and then at university, I joined what we called the University Air Squadron, the equivalent of the OTC. And then that was 4 years of, you're basically a reservist. I'm sure it's the same over here. Basically a reservist. And then at the weekend, you're off, you know, flying little aircraft locally instead of, you know, maybe, well, I don't know, twiddling your thumbs, wasting your time, whatever I would have been doing otherwise. So yeah, they had me at high school and then university. So it was a nice transition into, you know, the Air Force proper. You're out of college, you're into the military, you're following your dreams of becoming a pilot. You've been accepted into that program. You mentioned getting sponsored. Could you have made it through the sponsorship without having gone to that flying training while you were in high school? Or would it have been a lot more difficult? Well, with that business that I also had at college, no, it would have been fine. The sponsorship it's not a life-changing sum of money. It's more about, okay, you are selected. When you finish university, assuming you pass university, you will get your place on initial officer training. That was really that was the jewel in the crown. You know, you had a spot at the start of the career that you wanted, and I still had about 2 years left at university at that stage. So it was less about the money and more about you're in. You know, you've got your foot in the door. You can walk through it. So then once you got in, you did ultimately make a transition to intelligence. What kind of
changed your flight path, so to speak?
Yeah, so the technical term for what I suffered was lack of talent. So at school,
not many are afflicted with that.
At school, I did my it's called a flying scholarship, so 16 hours, the equivalent of a private pilot's license. And then at university, back then they've changed the system partly because of what I went through. You could do the first part of your flying training, so something like 100 hours. I finished that relatively early at university because I was keen and I would just get through it in the summertime. It was a great summer job when I wasn't at university. And then I had 2 years where my university air squadron was really about doing the odd flight here and there, but generally being a kind of practicing to be a junior officer, looking out for the other officer cadets from the university air squadron. Then I did, at the end of university, I took a gap year. So I went skiing. I was a ski guide in the French Alps. Probably the best job I've ever had.
I was going to say, it sounds horrible.
Yeah, that was a tough one. And then officer training, 9 months. And then I was right place, right time for a great opportunity. At the end of officer training, there's always a backlog in pilot training in the UK. It's been in the media quite a lot recently, actually. It's not getting any better. But again, a double-edged sword. You've got to wait for your flying training, but there's some cool opportunities. So they sent me off to Tokyo for a year, Tokyo, Japan, to be basically a very junior liaison officer over there working for United Nations Command. Lots of Americans in that part of the world, so we would fly in and out of Korea, Guam, other bases in that region, all around Japan. So I did that for a year. Great experience. Wouldn't have changed anything about that. Point is, by the time I got back to the second phase of my flying training, a good 3 or 4 years had gone. And in that time, my skill fade was, extreme. So I remember vividly actually being sat in the cockpit of a Firefly, is the name of the aircraft, with my instructor. And my instructor turns to me and he says, "Okay, Graham, take me up. We'll bash the circuit. Then we'll go and do some stalling. We'll do some radio navigation. And if we've got time at the end, we'll do some aerobatics." And everyone else in my course, they finished the first phase of their flying training the Friday before. This is the Monday. So they had the weekend for skill fade. I did mine, 3 or 4 years ago. And I'm sat there thinking, well, in fact, not thinking, I just said to the guy, "Look, no, you're going to have to take me back to straight and level because it's been 3 or 4 years. I'm not able to do that, I'm afraid." So that was the first sign. This is going to be tricky, to get myself back in the groove. And the military, they do not take prisoners. If you're not making the grade, there's there's probably tens of thousands of young kids behind you that will sit in that seat and we'll give them a go because, the funding's just not there to give people that extra time to bring them up to speed. So that was basically the beginning of the end. I suffered for another year working like a man possessed. That is the hardest I've ever worked. Well, maybe not quite as hard as the times when you're at war with the military, but certainly that time I remember working so hard, it didn't go unnoticed. But for the year of that time, just always behind the drag curve, so much pressure, and never quite getting really above that line. So after about a year, long story short, look, Graham, you're not going to make the grade. You're certainly not going to be a single seat fast jet pilot. You're not going to be good enough for helicopters. And in the multi-engine flying environment where, it's none of it's easy for sure, but the least difficult path, even that with a co-pilot next to you, you're just too much of a training risk. So I got chopped, is the technical term. And I remember being told by the station commander, it's taken very seriously, so quite a high level, full bird colonel, "Graham, we're going to have to chop you." And I knew this was coming. And it's amazing, the weight coming off your shoulders. And there's a lot going on. I'm thinking about my parents who, no doubt my dad loved saying to his mates, "Oh, my son's a pilot in the Air Force, great achievement." To have to go and tell them, "This ain't going to happen. I'm really sorry." But the weight lifted off my shoulders of, at least it's out of my hands. I couldn't have tried any harder. I can sleep well that I put everything into this. And then telling my dad, best bit of parenting I think I've come across. Told him on the phone, I remember vividly where I was, feeling the pressure. Not that my dad's some sort of monster that would come down on me, but telling my dad, "Look, your son's not going to be pilot in the Air Force. I'm sorry, Dad." And he just said without a blink, "No worries, what are you going to do next?" And I thought, that is A+ parenting right there, great. Always loved my dad. Loved my dad generally, but loved him a lot at that point because I felt He's got my back here. He's looking out for me. So that led to my first transition, really, within the Air Force. So in my 10-year Air Force career, first 2 were spent officer training, Japan, and then being unsuccessful with flying training. And that was a huge point in my life. I could have walked away from the Air Force and the military there completely. That was an option. But I felt I've put too much into this career. Flying's not going to work out for me. I can hold my head up high. Couldn't have worked any harder. And the beauty of that was the system recognised, this Graham Little, he's put a lot into this. If he can apply himself into something else, he can have a successful career. So went down the intelligence route, thinking it was going to be James Bond and all that kind of sexy stuff. Slightly different, but certainly doors were opened in intelligence that would never have been opened in flying. And hence I stayed for another 8 years doing I'd like to think some quite interesting, punchy stuff.
So after 2 years in and kind of coming to the end of your flying time, and you mentioned something previously where with that gap of 3 or 4 years, you kind of were behind the 8 ball from the start of your training.
Yeah.
But through that process, were you always aware that I'm just not catching up, or did you actually think in your head I'm going to get there, and it just never got there?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one. The kind of the mental dynamics of it all. Because it's such a big thing in your life, and because it's your number one goal, especially at that age, you get older and wiser and you realize that there's more to life. But at that time, it's about, I've got to do this. And I wasn't going to quit. I was going to work as hard as I could so that 2 things could happen. Either I'm successful and I get my spot in a squadron, or they take it away from me. But I wasn't going to quit. And that tenacity, I know it's a great quality to have, and then that translates really well into other facets of military life, personal life, my career post the Air Force as well. So there's another great lesson. Tenacity to achieve something. Don't be disheartened if you don't make the goal, but do learn from it. What could I have done differently? In my case, like I say, to hold my head up high and say I couldn't have worked any harder. I just wasn't good enough. If you don't win a gold medal in sprinting, are you an abject failure if you're not Usain Bolt? Perhaps not a great analogy to compare, that one true superstar that we all know and love compared to the thousands of pilots that get through their training every year. But, it's that kind of mentality. Don't be hard on yourself. And I was hard on myself for quite some time after, but looking back on it, what a great learning experience. I got a huge dollop of failure right at the start of my career, and it could have made me or break me. I'd like to think it did more of the former. It made me a better junior officer, and still had a great career in the Air Force, because I didn't just pack it in and go and grow my hair and become a civvy doing something completely different.
Well, like me, you wouldn't have grown your hair long.
Yeah, amen to that, sir. Yeah.
But you bring up a great point when you use the analogy of an Usain Bolt. I'm not a sprinter. I'm thinking to the Olympics. It's usually, I'm guessing, 8 other competitors. The 8th guy in that group knows that he's not going to beat Usain Bolt. But on the flip side, he's not just some scrub that they grabbed out of the stand and said, hey, put on some shorts and run against this guy. He still competed and worked his way to that 8th spot. So to what you're saying is, you didn't make the training necessarily as a pilot, but that doesn't mean you were never a pilot.
Yeah, exactly. I guess that comes down to coaching as well. If you kind of takes me back to my rugby career at school. We were a small school. We were never expected to win, but taking a beating can be quite a great lesson. You know that when life is hard, you can think back, this is hard, but I've kind of been here before, I've experienced this, I've been beaten 100-0 by a school that is 10 times the size of us. We did quite well that day, actually. It wasn't 200-0. I'm not advocating for a kind of loser mentality, but, just keeping it all relative. If you come 8th in the 100 meters, you're a champion in my eyes. You might not get that gold medal, but, think of their journey, what they've learned and what they've gone through, the sacrifice they've made. They're going to have a far interesting autobiography than the person that realized, I don't want to come 8th in the 100 meters. I'm going to do something else.
Right.
well, that's the way I see it. Maybe not everyone would agree with that, but you learn a lot. I certainly learned a lot through not being the success that I thought I was going to be to start with.
You could even boil it down to even a little bit more minor than that. That eighth guy in that of sprinters is going to be on TV being shown as the representative of his country for the Olympics. I guarantee you the guy who was ninth, who didn't get in that starting lineup, would have done anything he could have just to be the eighth guy to at least get on camera and represent his country.
100%. And be there and have a shot at it, because you never know. Usain Bolt pulls a hamstring, Asafa Powell maybe, gets a double do not start or whatever they call it, and he's out. And all of a sudden, hang on, now I'm at least going to be sixth. I'm only 3 away from a podium. You've got to be in it to win it, right?
So you also mentioned that when you came to the end, the realization, hey, you weren't going to cut flying training. They chopped you. And you referenced this, and I don't know if this was where you were going with it. Would you have been given the option to actually separate from the military at that point, and you chose to stay in, or they were just chopping you from the training, but there's no thought of releasing you from the military?
No, I had the option to walk. My contract, if you like, my commission, as we call it back home, was 18 years as pilot officer. So, one of those wasn't going to happen, so I had the option to walk. And a lot of my friends have walked. I could have gone private aviation, got a few friends that ended up doing that. I didn't have £100,000 in my back pocket at the time to go and get that training. And also, there's obviously more to the military than your actual role. It's a family thing. There is so much more to it. It's a way of life. And for me, just to walk away, and basically the one thing that stuck out most was essentially failed flying training. Like, nah. Let's see what else is out there in the military. Let's use the skills that I've developed through flying training, through all the other officer training, through what I've done in Japan. And let's apply that and let's make a positive difference. Let's bring something to the party and not just walking away.
What's a career commitment for the UK military? Did you just say 18 years? 18
years, yeah, for what I was doing. So as a pilot, they want, it's not an inexpensive thing to train a pilot from start to finish. Surprise, surprise. So they want your they want your blood, sweat, and tears, and they want some longevity out of that paid back.
So once you sign on the dotted line to enter the pilot program, you're signing for the full 18 years, not a series of re-enlistments?
Correct. After 18 years, you can, sign on for more. I mean, it's not a prison. There are ways to get out of that. But, generally speaking, you're a pilot in the Air Force. It's one of the coolest jobs in the world, or certainly that's what pilots think. So no one really complains. I mean, if they'd said to you, sign on the dotted line for 40 years, we all would have signed.
And in comparison to American military, because you mentioned our Air Force, our Navy, and Top Gun, the movie, being kind of your catalyst, does the UK Air Force do ship landing, or is it all just one branch of the flying arm of the military for the UK?
No, so we'd be the same as the US. We have an Air Force, a Navy flying element, and then the Army, generally helicopters. Our Marine Corps guys don't have their own Marine Corps aviation wing. They would kind of be subcontracted to the Navy to fly. So roughly speaking, the same as the US military system, just albeit very much smaller, very much more compact.
So there would have never been the component for your training had you stayed in to do carrier landings?
No, there would have been if I was good enough to go single set fast jet. I've got a friend, I was just talking to him today. He's coming over to Miramar as part of the Top Gun program as a UK exchange officer. So he's flown Typhoon and now he'll fly F-35. I forget what variant, A, B, and C that comes off the carriers. So that would have been an option, yeah.
Transitioning to intelligence work, was that when you got to come to Las Vegas for training?
No, that was a bit later. So the great thing about intelligence is it opens up lots and lots of doors. If you're a pilot, you'll fly that aircraft for at least 2 years, maybe the rest of your career. And if you're not flying that aircraft, you might transition into a different aircraft, but you're a pilot. And I'm not belittling the art of flight and everything. And, I'm still a big fan of flying, and, a lot of my friends are pilots, and it's a cool job. Don't get me wrong, but variety is the spice of life. And with intelligence, I was a station intelligence officer, looking out for threats around the UK and kind of Europe. Then I was a squadron intelligence officer, so I got onto a fast jet squadron, not as a pilot, as the INTO, intelligence officer as we call them, as the INTO. And went all round with the circus of a fast jet squadron, with the pilots, with the engineers, with the armourers, with all the support mechanisms, going to exercises all over the world, and then really nice facet of the way Western militaries are working at the moment. Drones or remotely piloted aircraft systems, they have obviously an intelligence element within them, and the way we and your American militaries work, there's a seat for an intelligence operative within the crew of these remotely piloted aircraft systems. So in a roundabout way, I got to scratch that itch of being part of a flight crew, albeit not in the air, from afar. So I did that just outside of Las Vegas for a short stint, as part of the program that the UK and the US have to bring the UK kind of on board with their remotely piloted air system program.
How long did you get to spend in Vegas?
That was a really nice 6 months. Just long enough for me to realise that the Strip is good for one or two excursions, and then you don't really go back unless you're visiting. Yeah, been there, done that. But no, great place to live, and having the desert. UK doesn't have anything like that. So in my back garden, I had the whole Nevada desert to play with. Fantastic, and a really exciting. Completely different role for me as an intelligence officer. So great time to have that great period in my life to have 6 months in Vegas. It was fantastic. Loved it.
Was that your first time in the States?
No, quite lucky. A lot of personal travel over here. I love it here. I really do. And then with the military, my first tour of Afghanistan was with the US Marine Corps. The reason I'm down here, just outside San Diego, I spent time with my intelligence officer opposite number, a captain in the US Marine Corps who's now working out at Pendleton. So I was down catching up with him. So my first experience professionally in the US was a training exercise with the US Marine Corps before we went out to Afghanistan. So been back and forward here a few times.
Working your way into your actual transition out of the military. When you transitioned to being an intelligence officer, did it change your career commitment as far as total years? Or was it still an 18-year commitment?
No. Training to be an intelligence officer is 6 months. No doubt costs the taxpayer a couple of quid, as we'd say back home, but not to the extent of training a pilot. So I think the commitment was a 6-year rolling cycle. So they want you for 6 years, and then after that you can kind of sign on. I think it was in 2-year chunks. So
when you first made that transition to intelligence, were you thinking a career at that time?
Yeah, so that's another funny one. As I've said, I was going to be a pilot, and that was all I was going to be. And then when that wasn't working out, didn't want to leave the Air Force. Intelligence sounded cool and turned out to be pretty cool. But probably from that day, you've got one eye on, okay, I'm not going to be a pilot. Let's give intelligence a go. But what else is out there? I think it taught me at a relatively early age, for someone that was enthused by aviation, that there might be a world outside of a cockpit. So working in a ground role in intelligence, that's really when you start to look at, okay, what else is out there? You're in this military bubble, and it can be all encompassing because you live and you breathe it, you sleep it. Your colleagues are your friends. You leave work, you're in the officer's mess, and you're now living with these people. You end up vacationing with them, you're on exercise with them, you go to war with them, it's everything. And you get the blinkers on, and certainly for me anyway, it's all I knew from the end of school and then university with what I was doing there. It was the military. So to try and pierce that bubble of what could be outside, it takes quite a lot of oomph to okay, let's understand what could there be something else. So that's really when you start to look. I think when flying wasn't going well, I'll go intelligence, but let's start to just have a look at what else might be out there.
And you bring up something that is important for me to get across, and I'm glad you brought it up organically. You mentioned that it's very easy to get into your bubble, and for your example, you just associate with other members of the military, and that's just, your bubble stays very small. Were you aware of that at that time, and were you making steps to increase your social circle and make sure that you were having influences other than just other military members?
Yeah, big style actually. I started to speak to people who had been through that journey before me. Okay, what lessons can I identify? What lessons can I learn from these people? And it was very much, take a step out of your comfort zone. Not that it's that scary, taking a step out of the military, but it's easy not to. Physically take yourself away from that Friday happy hour in the O Club or whatever it may be with your colleagues and your friends. Go to a networking event with entrepreneurs, or go and do something, outside the military. Force yourself out of it. It might not be very comfortable. You're used to a way of life and almost a language, a vocabulary. Go and just dip your toe in something else. And I started to do that, and spending more time with friends outside of the military, being interested and engaged in what they were up to, and where they'd seen success, what other exciting things are out there, and I think that was really important, to have a life outside of the military. And it meant my ultimate transition out of the military was a lot easier than feeling like you're just jumping off a ship into deep water and then being expected to swim.
When you were in that first, here we call it an enlistment, I don't know what you called it, but you had made the transition from pilot to intelligence. It then chopped it down into smaller yearly segments as opposed to an 18-year commitment. When you were coming up to that end of that first enlistment, did you already see kind of the light at the end of the tunnel, like you weren't going to stay in, or was there a significant moment that caused your pivot and said, nope, I'm going to end this one and I'm going to get out in 10 years?
Yeah. For me, probably aided by my initial transition from flying to intelligence, was I've got this silly little saying, but I think it holds true. Life is about photos for Facebook and stories for the grandchildren. I didn't want to be in my deathbed thinking I just had one career. A personal opinion, folks that stay in the military, it's a fruitful career, it's a varied career, it's an exciting career, it's a great career, and I don't regret a day I spent in the military. But for me personally, I wanted to try something different. I knew I wasn't going to be a millionaire in the Air Force, although the way some of my pilot friends are paid at the moment with retention bonuses, maybe not. But I knew I wasn't going to be a millionaire in the military, and I wanted to try something else. And because I've already been through a bit of failure in the military, I knew failure's not going to kill me. It leaves a bitter taste in the mouth, but you get over it. But you're better for it. You learn stuff. So I always wanted to have a crack at something else.
So did you start making plans or preparations for your transition? Did you know when you were getting out what you were going to go to?
I knew I wanted to do something entrepreneurial. And I knew that because I took a long, hard look at things like investment banking, property, things my friends were doing, really, easy access to understand what other roles were outside of the military. And I'd narrowed down that pool of options to entrepreneurialism because I went to a tech conference in Edinburgh. It was an investor conference, a bit like, you call it Shark Tank. Back home, it's called Dragon's Den. They were entrepreneurs pitching their idea to a room full of investors. It was in a big auditorium, so not just 4 or 5 sharks, but about 400 or 500. This is my idea. I want this amount of money, and I'll give you whatever percentage of my business. And I sat there, and it was the light bulb moment, because there were a string of about 30 entrepreneurs, all with a different idea, all with me sat thinking, gosh, that's a cool idea. Why didn't I think of that? And I left absolutely buzzing from that event thinking, this is really exciting. We all know and love, well, we all know, some of us love, Amazon's, Facebook's, all these tech startups. Of course, there are millions of little good ideas out there that haven't come to fruition yet, or are just building up, that need that support, that need that, dare I say, tenacity, acumen, the sort of skill set that you build in the military. The ability to, as I say frequently to my colleagues in the company I work for now, roll up your sleeves, get stuck in, make things happen, carry the ball forward. That military mentality goes into entrepreneurialism so sweetly. It's a great smooth transition, that skill set.
And you already stuck your foot in the entrepreneurial pond when you were in college. Did you have a mentor or somebody who was your guiding light? Did you know as a young boy even that you were very entrepreneurial in nature?
I think, like you say, I think having dipped your toe in it and realizing that the hardest thing is actually the act of dipping your toe, taking that first step, getting things started. That's the hardest thing by far. once you're in it, you've got no other option than to get stuck in. So I think previous experience was really my main motivator. You know, I've done this before, a calculated risk, and it came out pretty well. If things go pear-shaped, you know, there are other jobs out there, there are other career paths, but let's give entrepreneurism a go. And really, my mentor is my boss, the CEO of the company that I'm with at the moment, because he'd kind of been through a similar journey to me, not in the military, but he dipped his toe in entrepreneurialism a few times before. So he'd learned, you know, he did the hard yards, and then I was really lucky to almost ride his coattail and learn from him. So he really is my kind of main entrepreneur mentor, and I think you need that, because you can get started, but you need help. And you see this in Shark Tank, right? Or, you know, similar circumstances. You don't just take their money. It's their experience, their hard-won experience, you know, moving that ball, the hard yards, that if they can impart some of that into you, you don't make that mistake, and your success can be accelerated somewhat. So it's really important to know that you need help. You can't do it alone, and no shame in asking for help, you know, and expertise. And like you say, Paul, you know, mentorship is hugely important, and, you know, starting to do a bit of mentorship myself and pass some of that on, which is a great feeling.
So the company you're with now, was that your first venture out of the military, or did you do anything in between?
Nice little learning experience in between, actually. I took what I thought was my dream job, which was working for an outdoor sports shop. I refer to that as a pocket money job. I wanted a gap where I wasn't, you know, working like a man possessed. So it took about 6 months out, did a couple of months in India, traveled around. That was awesome. You know, you don't really get the opportunity to do that in the military, obviously, or that amount of time away.
Or at least not as a tourist.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not as a tourist. To be able to kind of go outside the wire and experience things, and not just be, you know, shopping in the BX every other day. So 2 months in India was cool. And then I got a job with a local outdoor sport shop, you know, basically selling skis and outdoor gear. And I remember thinking, yeah, this will be cool, you know, cushy little job, easy little number. Turns out my pride was such that I could not be on my hands and knees fitting a walking boot to some spotty 12-year-old from one of these private schools that I went to. I was probably just as bad back in the day, you know, and them turning around to their mum saying, "Mummy, he's done it too tight," or "He's not done it tight enough." I remember I'm on my hands and knees in front of this child. What am I doing? So that didn't last very long, but a good lessons learned. And then I wanted to do something completely different. So I got into film and TV production. And again, a great skill set transition from what you learn in the military. You know, are you organized? Can you turn up on time without question? You know, will you do the extra time and effort to get stuff done? Can you work in a team? Really nice segue. So very lucky that Marvel, of superhero fame, they were filming one of their films in Edinburgh, and I got onto the set of that and did that for a couple of months, which was a great experience. But again, I'm not going to be a millionaire doing this, or if I am, it's going to take a long time, you know, working up through the stages. So great to dip your toe in different things in between, and you know, that was always part of my plan, not to just jump straight into the next thing. But I took my 6 months, bit of traveling, random jobs that I would never have done otherwise, and then it was about finding the next big thing. And for me, that was a bit fortuitous, but I guess you make your own luck in life. Edinburgh is an interesting little hot pot of entrepreneurialism. There's a company called Skyscanner, the first company really to have flight comparison ticket pricing. They are an Edinburgh company and a unicorn, so valued at $1 billion. There's another company now based over here, FanDuel. Surprise, surprise, also from Edinburgh. And they both came out of a building in Edinburgh called Codebase. And Codebase is a tech incubator. So it's got probably 100, maybe 200 little companies within this tech incubator, from one-man band. Imagine a WeWork, but, you know, a bit bigger. So you've got a one-man band, you know, hot desking with his good idea, trying to develop it. And then you've got bigger companies like Skyscanner or FanDuel would have been. Maybe they take a floor in this building and then they kind of graduate out. A really nice ecosystem full of other entrepreneurial thinkers. You've got support, you've got investors buzzing about, you know, looking for the next best thing. And I saw this building, a few other friends worked for companies in there, and I literally just went on the website and looked through every single company, looking for the next Skyscanner, the next FanDuel. and two stuck out for me. One was doing sport and coaching analysis for the amateur. You see professional athletes now, they've got microchips and, you know, part of their kit, and everything is tracked, their diet. But this was for, you know, school kids, college kids, amateur athletes, you know, who want to be better. Great idea. So I was speaking to them, and then this other company, and I was drawn to them with two simple letters in their on their website, CT, counterterrorism, which is, you know, what I did for the majority of my intelligence career. Interesting, a counterterrorism company in Edinburgh, of all places, Sleepy Hollow, Edinburgh. So I started speaking to them as well. And as I kind of flippantly say, I took my boss out for a coffee, and he's not been able to get rid of me since. So it just started. There was two of them, two founders, and then I was the next employee. So I can't claim to be a founder. I wish I could for all sorts of different reasons, but I was number one employee, and as they kind of sometimes jokingly say, I'm the kind of the third founder. So that's how I got into the company. That's how I found them.
And that's how ultimately we met. And I want to give you the opportunity to talk about the company that you are with now, what the company is about, and more importantly, the product that you offer, because many of my listeners are in the law enforcement space or first responder space and could probably utilize your platform.
Yeah. So we're not solely focused on counterterrorism. The company is Cyacomb. Cyacomb, one of the founders, he was a digital forensics specialist within Police Scotland, or policing jurisdiction where I come from. He was the main guy for finding evidence on a computer or a mobile phone. He did that for about 10 years. And there was a massive problem in all sorts of investigations, but specifically investigations into child sexual abuse material. The problem is, when you go to a suspect's location, and suspects are no different from you and me, Paul, and everyone else listening, you've got a ton of digital devices in your personal life. You know, I've got a phone in my pocket, I've got a smartwatch, I'll have external hard drives, I've got broken computers, I've got thumb drives, I've got my work computer, a personal computer, etc., gaming consoles. So when police go into a location, they're looking at, I think the average is something like 18 digital devices in your average household. The problem is that investigator has to find evidence on these 16 devices. So they've got two options. They can sit there for as long as it takes to look through all these devices, or they can confiscate them all, take them back to their lab, where they tend to go on a backlog for up to, the worst we've heard is 2 years, while that evidence is waiting to be looked at by an expert. So back to my founder, he did this for 10 years. He hated this problem. He saw, we're not going to get more and more people like him, more expertise, so expensive, and there's just not enough humans to do this. And because of, if you think about Moore's law, there's only going to be more computing, more hard drives out there to scan. That we've got to be smarter about this. So he went off to university, led a PhD research team for 4 years, and came up with the technology that really underpins Cyacomb. And it's the ability to get into a hard drive and find that evidence up to 100 times faster than traditional methods that exist today. So game-changing. Game-changing, not my words, the words of a very senior UK politician when they procured our technology for the entirety of UK policing. So we're about getting into a hard drive or a phone and very quickly finding that evidence. So the investigator doesn't have to hang around there all day. They can be in and out in literally seconds. Or back in the lab, we can use our technology to scan that backlog and find the evidence. And when you're looking at investigations into child sexual abuse material, you know, you don't have to think too hard about the consequences of that data, that intelligence being sat on a shelf for, you know, any longer than it has to be. You need to find that evidence as quickly as possible to make a difference. Same idea in counterterrorism. Finding that evidence in double quick time could be the difference between, well, life or death.
So how many years into it now is the company?
So the company is 7 years old. Like I say, I was there from the start, and it's been a great journey. It really has, from taking a good idea, understanding what market we would apply it to, and then building it from literally a blank bit of paper. Albeit the two co-founders, ahead of me had done some of the hard yards, but then I came in, really no specialization. I wasn't a sales guy. I wasn't a marketeer. None of that. I was just this ex-military guy who could vaguely hold a conversation, roll up his sleeves, and get stuff done. But the skill set that I had from 10 years in the military like I say, perfect transition, I think, into that early startup phase of we need to get stuff done. If there's a problem in front of us, just like in the military, you don't stop. You don't start crying and looking for help. You figure out how to get through it, over it, past it, through it, whatever it may be. You just got to keep going. So that tenacity thing again coming into it, really vitally important, I think, for an entrepreneur.
Was your plan to come to the States and bring the representation of the company here, or were you sent here?
It kind of was, actually. So my year in Japan, time spent in Vegas before, even the odd 6-month jaunt in Afghanistan or Iraq. I love where I live in Scotland, but I love getting out and seeing the world. I'm a bit of an adventurer like that. So I could see from an early stage with Cyacomb, the UK is a huge market for us, but the US market easily 20 times as big. So I saw from an early stage, we're going to have to, open an office or have some sort of operation over in the US to look after North America. And I always had my eye on it. We grew for the first 4 and a bit years, 5 years. Then a little thing called COVID happened, which, affected us all in different ways. And towards the end of COVID, we were doing well in the UK. And I'm not suggesting that we're arrogant enough to think that just because something is working in the UK, it's going to work in the US. But again, with my experience of working in the military with service people from all over the world, but mostly from the US, I know how you guys tick, or I certainly know better than your average UK person, having worked closely with you guys. And I just had a good feeling that this is gonna work well in the US. So I said to my boss, look, let me go over, we'll get a bit of funding together, we'll invest in Graham going over there for a couple of months, right at the end of COVID, to the point where I had to come in via Canada for a couple of weeks before the US would open its doors. So I went through Canada, spent another month and a half going around the US, basically just getting our technology, our tools under the noses of, folks like you, Paul, folks in law enforcement. Is this going to work over here? And it was a super successful trip, that 2-month trip, and we understood, okay, there's definitely a market for this. We sold some stuff as well, but I'm not really, although I am a salesperson now, I'm more about building partnerships. So it's about finding the people who can see our technology, see the benefit, and are willing to go on that journey with us as well. So we found some champions in the US, and that kind of set the scene, laid the foundations for then what we have now. Fast forward a year, there's 6 of us full-time over here in the US. I'm the only Brit. And then we're employing five US folks all around the country to really start the kind of US side of Cyacomb and help investigators catch more bad guys, and with any luck, safeguard some children as well.
Is there plans to continue growing the company?
Yeah, big style. So the market is a really interesting one. This crime type is sadly
not going anywhere.
It's not going anywhere, as you know all too well, Paul. Not going anywhere, getting worse. So, investigators, they need more help from technologies, not just Cyacomb, the other great vendors in this space as well. So the market is growing. The fact that we can help is awesome, but it's a huge market. The other great thing about Cyacomb is there's kind of 2 sides to the company. So what I'm involved in is helping law enforcement, as I've described. The other cool side of our company is using that same core technology. And if I use just a really kind of easy example, if you jump on Facebook, apparently you're only 4 or 5 clicks away from accessing that kind of horrific material, illegal material. So we can use our same core technology, apply it to the likes of Facebook. For your listeners, I'm using inverted commas. And we can find that data, that illegal child sexual abuse material. We can find it very quickly. We can remove it. We can block it as well, so that is never seen again. So we can apply our technology to wider than just the law enforcement arena. And of course, especially in the west coast of the States, we're not far from where these companies are based. So the future looks really exciting for helping not just law enforcement, but the online society. It's a huge problem. The policing of internet. It's just grown and grown and grown. And we think that the internet is at its seatbelt moment. Seatbelt moment being, I think it was Volvo, they introduced the seatbelt. Folk are thinking, hang on, I'm not wearing a seatbelt. I'll decide if I'm going to be safe or not in my car. You look at us where we are today. You would never dream of getting in your car without buckling up. The internet is at its seatbelt moment. If we don't do something now, it's only going to get worse. There can be no doubt. Child sexual abuse material does not there is no place for it, but it cannot have a place in the internet where anyone can jump on, either on Facebook, and we're not saying that Facebook is right.
Whatever platform,
thanks. Or the dark web, you should not be able to access this material. It just shouldn't be. So it's great to be involved in a company that is very values driven, values led, that is trying to do something about this heinous crime.
So in the sense of growth and thinking about transition, the members that you've onboarded that are here in the States, are they former law enforcement, former military? You mentioned you're the only Brit on the team, but what is the company looking for if somebody has an interest in doing the work that you're doing?
Yeah. So we've got 2 ex-law enforcement, 1 ex-Marine. That skill set, like I've said, from policing, from military, is pretty much exactly what we're looking for. Any of your listeners that have any interest in what I've said today, please definitely check us out, cyacomb.com, Cyacomb. Keep an eye on what we're doing. We will be growing, and we're looking for, not specifically today, so I'm saying keep an eye on us, but in the future, we're going to be looking for ex-law enforcement expertise that can, walk the walk, talk the talk, and help us access, our customer base, which is predominantly law enforcement and security services. So keep an eye, and you'll be able to find me on LinkedIn if anyone's interested in learning more about Cyacomb.
And is your long-term goal to stay here in the States?
So I have a 5-year visa. Last weekend, I turned a girlfriend into a fiance.
Congratulations.
Thank you. One of the happiest days of my life. Absolutely amazing. She's American. The 5-year visa, we'll see how it goes. If I had to put my pen to paper now, probably looking at 2 years over here, get Cyacomb up and running. And then at that stage, if we're blessed and we've got kids, probably start a family back in Scotland. But I love it here. Absolutely. It's one of the best moves of my life so far. So long may it continue, but the rough plan, 2 years, maybe head back.
Now that you've had a little bit of time under your belt, any regrets leaving the military when you did?
That is a cracking question. And actually just last night, catching up with my buddy from the US Marine Corps who I was in Afghanistan with, the things I miss most about the military life, and I imagine it's the same in policing as well, camaraderie. You're told it a lot, you speak of it when you're in there, but you don't appreciate it until you've left. How strong that brotherhood is, and definitely something I missed, especially I think going from a squadron of airmen to a tech startup with 3 of us. My 2 founders, they're great guys, but they're technical computer engineers. I've come from this circus of banter is the grease between the wheels, and I'm not saying my founders don't have banter in them, but 3 of us in an office working on technology. Friday comes along, quite keen for anyone for a beer before we head home on Friday. And you look around and it's sometimes quite a lonely office. Now we're about, I think, just south of 50 folks, so we've grown, but that camaraderie it's not a regret really, but it's just something I noticed. That's one of the main things that I miss about military and kind of service life.
And just to kind of wrap this up, you made mention of how you kind of saw your exit, and it was always something for you that wasn't far away. It literally was your tomorrow, just whenever tomorrow was going to come. And you were making steps, even if it was just thinking about what am I going to do afterwards. And then you took some steps as you were approaching that transition. Any last bit of advice for anybody who's, especially military members that are coming up to their transition?
Yeah. And at the risk of sounding like a cliche here, the 3 main things that made all the difference for me, hugely important: network. And that network of networks. So I remember taking some advice from an old friend from school who was in the army, and as he transitioned, he had an Excel spreadsheet, and he numbered it 1 to 20, and it was blank. And he gave himself a goal by the end of the month or whatever. He wanted 20 names in the sector that he wanted to go into. It was banking, and every time he would go and meet someone, the final thing he would ask is, could you give me an introduction to another 2 people? And that 20 became 60 and just grew and grew and grew. And of course, it stopped growing at the point where he met someone through that technique or that tactic that offered him a job. But also, don't just stop at that point and bin it, because you'll never know when that network is going to come in handy again. The network of networks is hugely, hugely powerful. And that is, from what I've seen personally and from others as well, that's where your next job is going to go, is going to come from. And don't be shy. Everyone likes to be called an expert, right? You know, reaching out to someone on LinkedIn, picking up the phone to someone, hey, you've got some expertise in whatever sector that may be. I'd love to buy you a coffee and just ask you a bit more about that. If someone comes to me and asks me, Graham, you're an expert in this. Well, the first thing I probably think is imposter syndrome. The second thing I think is, all right, yeah, maybe I do have a few things to say. And if I'm going to get a coffee, maybe a donut out of it as well. Sure thing. That's worth, half an hour for me. So don't be shy. Go out and ask folk for advice. Find out what you can from them. Be interested. Be engaging. Be pleasant to them. And doors will open, I guarantee it.
You bring up a great point in that the word expert can easily be thrown around and almost lose value. But I think one of the things that our community, military, first responder, we do an injustice to ourselves is you have to remember being an expert just means you know a little bit more about that topic than the average person. So instead of thinking that, oh, I'm not an expert because of this grandiose title. Embrace what you've learned and what you've done and realize that you do have an expertise.
Yeah, big style. It makes me think of my dad's 3 words for a job interview. Go in there and be honest, be humble, and be hungry. And I think it's that middle one, be humble. Like, I'm not an expert. I've been doing this for a bit of time. Here's what I've learned. Maybe you can get something from that. I think that's a really important kind of sentiment to have. But also understanding that expertise, if we take what you were just saying there, Paul, expertise is just around the corner. What's the difference between someone that knows a little and someone who's considered an expert? It's the time and the dedication that they've spent, understanding whatever that topic is. Pick up a book, get online, spend time, go and do free work experience, hone your skills in that, because you're either going to become an expert or you're going to realize this isn't for me. A bit like working in that outdoor shop or working in film and TV, in that pathway to becoming an expert, I'd like to think I've got a bit of expertise in what I'm doing at the moment. But if it wasn't for me, I would have found that out pretty quickly, and I would have realised, I've tried it, not for me, lesson identified, I'll move on to something else, and I'm better for it.
Have you been able to find any or get in any snow skiing here in the States in all your trips?
No, I think I'm a kind of shock of capture of being in a climate where the first thing I do every morning isn't worry about, how many thermal layers or jacket or hat I'm going to, sometimes in February, I could go out wearing shock horror shorts in Edinburgh, unheard of. So this might well end up being the first year of my life really, since probably about the age of 5 where I won't get some snow skiing in, but it's only mid-March, so there's time yet.
If anybody's got any more questions for you, how can they get in touch with you?
Probably the best way to find me is on LinkedIn, Graham Little, Cyacomb. A simple search will pop up. I'm really passionate about the whole transition experience. Entrepreneurialism isn't going to be for everyone, but there's a whole world out there of exciting, challenging, rewarding careers, jobs, adventure to be had. And if I can give anyone any sort of advice, I'm more than happy to, drop me a line. Might cost you a coffee and a donut.
I appreciate your time, sir.
Pleasure.
I appreciate you watching. But before you go, if you like the video, please hit that subscribe button. Also, any comments are appreciated. Thank you.